Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Day 3 of CogX 2021. We're coming live from the Everyman Cinema in King's Cross. Now, throughout the last 3 days, we've talked a lot about business, we've talked about digital data, we've talked about economics, we've talked about brilliant startup ideas, but actually at the root of all this is the creative spirits. And I'm delighted that this session we're going to be focusing on how technology can inspire further ideas in this field. This talk is going to be hosted by Jessica Driscoll, who is the head of immersive technology at Digital Capital. You will be able to fire in questions online if you're at home or in your office via the Hop-in app. And if you are here, do please put your hands up towards the end of the session. So get yourself thinking. Jessica, over to you.
Thanks very much, Joy. So I'd like to introduce Karl Woolley, Global Real-Time Director of Immersive and Interactive at Framestore. So good afternoon, Karl.
Hello.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Having me, everyone.
Brilliant. So what we're going to do today is, as we're in a cinema, we are going to show you a very brief video focusing on some of the projects of CreaTech. CreaTech is a program that Digital Catapult run in collaboration with Arts Council England, where we fund 20 projects with £20,000 to make an early stage prototype. And then they go on, some of them go on to receive about £100,000 in production funding in a second phase. So we wanted to show you these clips to show the kind of innovation, the pivoting, the shift to at home spurred on by the pandemic last year. So CreaTech historically has had a mix of location-based entertainment, at-home experiences, things shown in galleries, but because of the constraints last year, everything shifted to at home. So we just wanted to show you some examples, and then Karl and I are going to draw out some of those themes and talk a little bit about has storytelling been reinvented during this pandemic? You know, what's kind of going to change? What's going to stick? Do audiences want hybrid, or will they go back to doing physical in-person things, and this will just be a chapter in history? So if we could play the video, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
The Invited reimagines the Gothic story of Dracula in a seance, in which an augmented reality pop-up book serves as a conduit for Dracula's curse to re-enter current society. Set in a dark, secret location, a physical book and a mobile device spirit detector will summon a small audience through a beautifully unsettling experience in which each page turn reveals a new, exquisite papercraft world and a new set of atmospheric animations to those who were invited to Dracula's reincarnation.
You came willingly to my invitation and entered my world. Welcome.
That is the reason for being, the reason for life.
Our story, A Place to Be, offers a narrative of Black joy and achievement. We take viewers inside a space and time that most never even knew existed. A space devoted to Black celebration in Britain, from the Windrush generation right through to the late 80s and beyond. A safe haven from the systematic racism faced outside the unlicensed parties known as shebeens. Our story takes place a week before the Brixton Uprising in April 1981. As racial tensions rage in the streets, Brixton locals take refuge in an underground shebeen.
Hey, how you doing? Uh-oh! Don't let me shop. Don't look so worried. Outside is crazy. In here, it's all good.
the real-time game engine environment with the main characters in volumetric capture, enabling viewers to move around, get to know the characters, and have a dance.
Do you know this painting? I mean, you've probably seen it before, right? But actually, what do you know about this painting? Why is this one important? Why do some paintings stand the test of time and not others? All great paintings have something in common. They have a great story behind them. This project is about uncovering these stories, changing your views on the paintings that changed the world.
Our VR and 360 series, History of a Painting, is a 4-part series aimed at young audiences. Each of the episodes will focus on a different painter and their most iconic work. Our prototype, for example, which serves as the series pilot, focuses on Georges Seurat and his most famed painting, La Grande Jatte.
History of a Painting aims to democratize art by engaging and empowering viewers to better understand the art that influenced our world. The series' narrative arc follows the struggle each artist faced before becoming the icons we know them to be today. And by telling the very real stories behind the painters, we aim to show that world-changing art can come from anyone and can be enjoyed by anyone.
You came. Do you know, I knew you would.
The Foundling, a tabletop immersive experience told through objects, AR, AI, and spatial sound, all delivered to your door. Told in 4 episodes over several days, this is storytelling revealed through objects, animated by augmented reality, and personalized by AI. Spatial sound helps to transform your dining room into a theatrical playing space, where Wetner's Hopgood Shakespeare comes spilling out. You don't have to step foot in the theatre. We'll bring it to you. Your mobile device kickstarts the experience with a playful, written conversation with Jem, a young child. In the parcel, there's a letter from Hopgood and an object she urges you to construct. It releases the smell of the marsh, starts to glow, and with a swish of her skirt, Hopgood enters your room to plead for your help.
So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of the experiences we're talking about. And the one that I'd like to focus on, Karl, is the experience by Raucous, because I know you're familiar with the team. So we've seen creators experimenting with different kinds of content last year and at home. What do you think of this experience, and why do you think it could or couldn't be viable?
I think it's particularly interesting because it tries to blend analog and digital in a sympathetic way. Combined with craft, and Sharon is such a passionate creative that when you meet her for the first time I met her, I just knew what heart and soul had gone into that project, and it comes across in the prototype. It's amazing. And I think in the past, at least at Framestore, we've been doing non-traditional storytelling, if you like, for 10 plus years. And technology's never really been the problem. The tech's always been there, and we've always been able to do kind of different and innovative things. But there's never been a market for that technology. VR in the early days, we had to take it to South by Southwest and have people come to us. We couldn't, the first thing we did was for Game of Thrones. If we put that on a marketplace, I think there was 80,000 addressable users. It's just not a viable market. So this is why I think the pandemic has been interesting for creators in this space, because you know where the audience is, everyone's at home, and you then have a legitimate way to take the technology to them. And AR through mobile phones is obviously quite a low barrier to entry for most people, because everyone has one, if not 2 of these devices in their pocket. Henceforth, why lots of the activations you've seen over the last 15 months are of that ilk. But why I think the Raucous one was particularly interesting is the way that they ship a package to the user, if you like, to the audience member. A bit like, subscriptions have become sort of commonplace, and cook at home kits have become a big thing. So I thought that was really clever. Send somebody something and then you engage over a period of time rather than just download an app, 15 minutes of content and finish. So really clever, but raises some interesting points, I think, because none of those activations are still kind of commonplace, are they? So the last year to 15 months, we've been able to experiment and prove what works and what doesn't work. But none of these things fit into a traditional funding or marketing model. Like, where do they sit in people's content plans? How does Sharon, as an example, and I don't mean to make this biased totally towards Raucous and Sharon, it's just I know her better than the others. Where do you go to with it's my at-home craft kit with AR and AI and machine learning, and it tells a great story? What budget do you have for that? No one.
Does it come out of advertising? Yeah. Does it come out of, where does it sit? And it is really difficult. Do you think in the UK we are less into funding things like this? For example, in Canada, they're really good at funding VR activations and very experimental. In Belgium, in France, the US, startups can get lots and lots of money for content activations. Why do you think in the UK we're a little bit reticent to fund things like this?
Well, I think the first reason I've seen this, not just in kind of public funding, but in private funding of activations, and why we sort of moved our digital team from London to New York, is the addressable market is 6 times bigger, and the money available therefore to do these things is much bigger, and more people prepared to take a risk. Canada, especially Montreal and Vancouver, has a big digital gaming community, professional one. So it sort of makes sense to have incentives around there, and you need to develop and build talent. I mean, I don't like to say this in comparing us to the Americans, but we're slightly risk averse compared to the Americans, especially if any of you've got American colleagues or clients. They not afraid of just going for it. And I think, that's probably why they're slightly further ahead. And you look at, all of the core technology for these things comes out of the West Coast of America.
I think that's a really interesting point. And I think that programs like CreaTech can allow creators to fail and to make a mistake because they get the funding. And it's not attached to a client. It's not attached to a particular project. It's a creative idea that is potentially matching someone from the glam industry with someone from the tech industry and putting them both together. Do you think that we need more of these programs to help storytelling develop? Or do you think that the market at the moment is still not there and we need to kind of shift more to building the talent pipeline to help these stories get told?
That's a very good question, and I'll answer the second part after the first, which is, if you don't experiment with these things, you're never going to know. Like, otherwise, everything's a theory. You learn so much more by doing something than by hypothesizing about it. And I don't think that matters if you're, a 1 or 2 person studio, or if you're 6,000 people like us. You still will learn more by doing than you will by sitting in a room and talking about it. However, it costs money. People's time is costly. It's the most precious commodity. So you have to recognize that and be able to fund it. So I think it could be seen perhaps by kind of the British economy and attitude towards funding these things as frivolous, when really what we've always been good at the past is we've been strong on creative and exploration. I think it would be a shame not to fund those things. However, what we're seeing at the moment across our traditional filmmaking business and in this space is the talent shortage is, I was going to say worse, but I shouldn't. So I'll say worse because it's bad. It's really hard to find people and good people. And the pandemic has caused a rise in use of what used to be corporate technology for Zoom, for instance, and other work platforms, has meant there's been a rise in demand for technologists globally, not just in kind of VR and AR and XR and filmmaking, but a developer out of college might have been looking at, right, what am I going to do for my first gig? How do I get kind of the experience? Like, do I have to become a runner, then a this, then a that? I've heard stories from some of my US colleagues of people graduating from like courses in the US and walking straight into 6-figure jobs. Like, it's crazy. And as an arts-based industry, how do you compete with that? So I think these things enable smaller studios to kind of create and nurture younger talent and bring them along. And they're inspirational. Like, I guess my kids are quite fortunate, as are yours, of course, Jessie, like have every piece of kit under the sun at home in my study. It's a bit like Curry's PC World or Best Buy in my study. So they can go in there and play with a HoloLens or a Magic Leap or a VR game. And they don't see those things as frivolous because they don't think about, oh, how many copies do you need to sell? Does it tick this metric? Is it going to, you know? So for them, I guess it's inspiring. And I think younger audiences, what I have seen is lots of the kids in my I've got 3, but the 2 elder kids classes, they play a lot of VR games, and you know, so I think seems to be quite a big rise in that, which I hadn't anticipated.
Definitely.
If you can get your hands on the kit, of course.
Exactly. I was just about to say, we did some audience research as part of the Audience of the Future program with Nielsen, which used to be Superdata, and unsurprisingly the biggest content consumed over the pandemic was VR games in over 35's audience, and also surprisingly AR for social purposes has surpassed games as well. So even though Pokemon Go was really popular and other AR games, the social side has completely taken that over. So I think it's just a different way to think about telling stories that creatives from something like the CreaTech XR program might not have quite caught up with yet. And like you said, you know, what does storytelling mean to a younger audience? Because I don't know whether you experienced the Royal Shakespeare Company's The Dream as well over the summer. That was a great family experience. We put it up on the projector and the children could interact using an iPad or phone and put the fireflies on the screen. And I thought that was a beautiful kind of new type of content experience that you could do together. I wonder if we're going to see more of those, though, to your point about funding, you know, where does that sit?
Yeah, I guess it's that's a great example. And I mean, I saw that too. And, you know, like my wife is an English teacher and a big fan of Shakespeare. So we had a totally biased audience, watching that experience. But
much more informed. My kids were like, oh, get the firefly, look at that. And I'm like, I don't really understand what this is about.
Yeah, I mean, I was schooled on that afterwards about, did you not get this? Did you not get this? Did you not get this? And I was like, I was just playing.
You were looking at the mocap, yeah.
I was the kid. So like, I thought that experience was really interesting because it exposed the technology. So kind of after we watched the show together, I said my wife and my family with us, like, right, this is how it worked. It was this is used from Hollywood. That's the screen. That's really, and that's happening live. I was like, yeah, it's pretty simple, really. So I thought that was interesting. Whether that's going to be like a mainstay, I'm not so sure. I just think it's another option. It's another way to tell a story. It doesn't mean it has to be like the one and only. It's a bit like just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? You know, so
I think that in the beginning, especially around 2017, you know, everyone was just doing VR because they could. And there were so many marketing activations, lots of companion pieces, and some of which were not very good and actually quite harmed the progression of the sector, because people tried something and thought that wasn't very good. There was no craft, there was no narrative, there was no kind of thinking about the user experience. I think people are much more savvy now and thinking about that whole audience journey. Talking about audience journeys, it's interesting, since we've been talking about this session, we have had not a disagreement, but surprising each other with facts about content. So Karl said to me, oh, well, I don't know if people want to do VR anymore in situ, you know, somewhere because of COVID. And I said, well, I went to Sea Life, which is underground, and I saw 6 people sat very, very close to each other with headsets on a motion platform with some sanitizer, but no kind of clean box or fancy technology for cleaning in sight. And I thought, okay, so VR is back. Do you agree?
I mean, you know what my answer is to this. What, Jesse's not? Did you go with your children or not? I can't remember.
I didn't let them go on it because I said, look, you've got it at home. I'll show you a deep sea thing at home.
Anyone that's been in lockdown with children will do anything to get out of the house. So I'll preface that with my answer with that. But no, I was a bit skeptical because before pandemic, we were doing lots of work in themed entertainment for some of the big parks in the States and Asia, and all of that work just fell off a cliff, and we had to diversify, look at other opportunities. So the thought in lockdown 1 of someone going into a venue they've not been to before, trying an experience or a piece of technology they've never tried before, putting something on their face that they've shared with others, I just couldn't conceivably see that happening. And then as this disastrous situation has gone on, any opportunity to get outside and do something, I think actually people are like, I just need to do something different. And what's really interesting is Army of the Dead, which is a Netflix, one of Zach's projects that we worked on at Framestore. We haven't built this experience, but they're launching a kind of across America, big, large-scale VR experience, traveling one, quite substantial scale, I'm led to believe. So I don't think they would be doing that if they didn't sort of see a plan the way through. And those organizations don't get to be the size they are if they don't have not backed by kind of, you know, strategic thinking and data, is it? So that was interesting to see. I mean, I'm not 100% sure. I don't know. Like, we've done a few things in, you know, Westfield, you know, like more pop-up installations with Sky's one of our previous clients and others. And I'd be interested to monitor to see what happens. But yeah, the bigger stuff, like, now it's a bit more commonplace, so people know what an Oculus is. You don't have to explain it to someone. People tend to know. I think the market's definitely growing, and like you say, the spend, like, you couldn't get hold of the headsets, they sold out, you know, and these are these were hard to come by, you know, weren't they?
I think it really, again, it seemed like the time where storytelling in VR especially could have really rocketed was during the pandemic, but you couldn't get an Oculus for love nor money. We ordered Nreal AR glasses from China, which arrived 18 months later. So a combination of, as you said earlier, the Suez Canal plus the production lines in China, you know, that really kind of, again, stymied. So I was really hopeful the time is now, and then the time is maybe a little bit further on still.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, the thing is, you can buy them in a supermarket, right? You can go to Argos and you can get one. Like, it's. I think the bigger development, though, even though the hardware has been a bit of a problem, is things like Epic Games launching Unreal Engine 5 in early preview and early access, and 4.27. Early preview is now out, and all the features in that, and the fellowship initiative that they launched, and people being at home in front of a computer and being able to do like incredible things that, you know, it used to take a team of 5, 10, 15, 20 people, and now you can mocap in your bedroom and produce a short film in a matter of days. Pretty remarkable. So it doesn't all have to be, I guess, about VR or kind of specialist hardware. There's lots you can do with, you know, like an iPhone and a PC or a laptop. It's all really about, you know, the technology is an enabler, but it's really about the creativity and the ability to kind of explore your ideas, which is why things like Creative XR are so good, because you reach a point where you do need some bit of funding or guidance or mentorship, which is how I got to get involved with, you know, Raucous and another couple of studios through that program. So yeah,
I think that mentorship's so key, because I think sometimes, and what you were saying earlier about some of those techniques with Unreal, I think that all kind of falls under the banner of what people are now calling virtual production. And that doesn't only involve expensive LEDs, like you said. All of those techniques filter through, and I think that those creatives, some of them will explore by themselves and some of them need a little bit of hand holding. And I think that having some inspiration and some stories that they can get hold of, for example, I went to see Current Rising the other day at the Royal Opera House. I thought that was a great thing for people to understand that opera can be done in this way. You know, people who would never have gone to the opera house, I think they saw something with VR interactive and then booked tickets. I chatted to a few people outside and they were like, oh, this is a really different way to tell the story, to be with other people. Another thing that I wanted to ask you about is for people who are experienced and on the kind of interactive VR circuit, you might go to Tribeca or Cannes or Venice. Obviously, last year, none of that was happening. And people shifted to more online platforms. For example, Museum of the Realities, London Film Festival did their own thing. And that kind of storytelling before you've even gone into the story, I think is quite interesting. So you're in a space and you're already experiencing something that is, all around you. And it kind of leads you in that interstitial storytelling space. Do you think that we'll have more of those types of spaces and these kind of hybrid spaces to bring people together before they do content? Do you think that will fly?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think because online alone doesn't feel special enough, does it? Right? Like you work on your phone or your iPad or Android tablet or your computer for 8-9 hours a day, especially at the moment. So to then kind of have, to then entertain yourself on that same device just to me doesn't feel quite special. But the kind of the bridging, what you're talking about there, bridging kind of, like an online digital experience and a real world one, and then involving you in the story before, during and after. That's something which, if you think about, and I'm sure, people in the audience here and at home have had secret cinema type experience. Like I think the Back to the Future one absolutely nailed that, and inviting you beforehand to kind of assign yourself a role, get a costume, turn up, and then afterwards that they do that really very well. And then really perhaps all of this is a precursor to where we're eventually, or some people think we're headed around, telling stories across multiple platforms and technologies with things like, like the Oasis in Ready Player One. How far off are we from being able to do something like that? Are people going to want to do something like that? Or the Matrix, for instance, those kind of things where technology has been the limiting factor before and they were just science fiction. If you wanted to do something like, if you wanted to build the kind of the truck that he's got his VR set up and like haptic suit and stuff in, you could do that.
That already exists now.
You could do that. That exists. So then it's, do audiences want that kind of experience? Do they want to kind of read the book, watch the film, live the experience, have kind of like the side game and stuff, where in the past, like in a way that sequels have always been a bit pants compared to the original, so have the games compared to the film, and it's very rare that one is on par with the other. So technology's been there. It's about kind of how do we as kind of creatives and storytellers and with the IP holders bring all of that together like that, and that's the hard bit.
I think that's really interesting. Exactly. And it's also kind of convincing whoever is telling the story that all of these other mediums are important as their original conception, because there isn't really anyone that sits there and thinks, right, I'm going to tell a story across all of these channels right at the beginning. It's a filmmaker or an author or a games developer. There isn't a kind of all-round content creator. So maybe that is what the future is going to bring. Are people going to become these all-round content creators? I think that the skills gap is a huge issue with that, and people who, creative technologists, that role didn't exist when I left school, and virtual production supervisor, and I'm sure you can reel off a whole list of roles that didn't exist. How do you teach people things that we don't even know are going to happen?
Yeah, that's a good point. We're actually in the process of trying to standardize these new job descriptions at the moment.
Good luck.
Which is really painful, especially when you've just kind of adding 2 additional organizations to the existing companies. So there's kind of, that's why we're the size we are. And you have, it's what's quite important to be able to work internationally with colleagues across different projects, especially when resources are tight. Is a technical artist in London means the same as a technical artist in America, because one can be very art driven and one could be like a tools programmer. And then you have kind of internal departments where, oh no, we call that a virtual production TD. Oh no, that's a real-time artist. So we're actually going through that to standardize at the moment, because if you're in kind of college or further education, or you're doing like a private course or something at Escape, how do you sort of focus on, how do you know where to like hang your hat? in an industry that changes so quickly. So that is also quite tough, I think, for people trying to choose a direction. But I think the problem starts far earlier on, which is, how do you inspire young audiences to become, creators of the future? Because, when I was a kid growing up, playing video games just seemed impossible. Like, how can I make that? That's
Exactly.
amazing. How can I make that? My parents gave me a BBC Micro, and I had a Pascal code book. I just used to copy code. I still never made a game in my life, but I could see how it could seem quite daunting, which is why I think the way that you can now pick up online learning materials with, whether it's with YouTubers or Udemy courses and free access to game engines, we should probably be doing a bit more to let people out there, especially young females, know that it's a potential.
Diversity is a really big problem still in our industry. I sit in lots of rooms of only men. Not that that's that's a problem for me. Maybe it's not a problem for them, but it should be. Okay, I'm so sorry to cut you off there, Karl, but I'd love to open up to the audience for questions. So if we've got any questions in the room, and then maybe we can shift it to online. I see someone with their hand up. I think there's a roving mic coming, but we might be able to hear you. Or maybe no, don't do that. The audience can't hear you. Wait 1 minute.
I'm just wondering, as far as storytelling goes, I mean, do you think we're going to change from the way stories are created, from being a writer, say, or will we go more towards creating environments, virtual environments or whatever, within which they emerge?
That's a really good question. I'll let you answer that, Karl, and then I'll say some thoughts.
I mean, I've got a non-Framestore answer, which I'm just going to rephrasing, because what I want to say is, if the idea is not very good, the idea is not very good. Doesn't matter what medium you're telling it in. So, like, it's all about the story and the writing. Like, you can't start with, right, I want to make something with a Kinect camera on a holographic display. What's my idea? You've got to start with the idea and then go, right, what's an interesting way I can tell that story? Do a bit of research and go, okay, well, a kind of a hologauls display would add something to this. Like, I don't know if any of you've seen the War of the Worlds immersive experience. It's quite interesting how they combine, VR with hologauls and stuff. So I don't think we should be looking at kind of the technology platforms to steer the future of storytelling, if you like. But I think it's, how can they enable you to tell a richer or deeper story? Are there things you've not been able to explore before in a book that you can with a film, and the things you can't do in a film that you can do with a VR experience? And what happens if you try and pull them all together? That's kind of that's my take on it. I think the idea and the creative is core, really. I've seen so many things fail where it's the whole concept has been hung off a piece of technology.
I completely agree. I think that Madrid Noir, which is going to be launching soon, a really great VR experience that we also supported. The script is really, really great, and the writing's fantastic, along with the concept. So I think it's interesting what you said, though, because I spent a lot of time in Second Life. Some of you who are a bit older might remember that. And being in a virtual world for like 8 hours a day was a very strange experience, and some interesting theatre collaborations and strange performances came out of being in that space, because people kind of inhabited it. So in one way it was technology led, because you couldn't pull an elephant out of your pocket in real life, or you couldn't fly or turn yourself into being 100 feet tall immediately as you could in Second Life. But I think, again, if the creativity or the storyline wasn't strong, the experience would have just been something interesting but not really very compelling, or you wouldn't ever go back to it.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, yeah, lovely, thank you. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, I mean, I'm really more thinking that, I mean, I've never played Fortnite because I'm too rubbish at it, but my daughter has. But just watching something like Fortnite, I think I'm watching quite a good film. I'm watching quite a good thriller, if you like, or action film. I'm just wondering whether the actual role of the person who thinks this happens and this happens and this happens might kind of go away, just because we have something where those stories happen by themselves.
What do you think?
I think interesting that you say you wouldn't enjoy playing it because you're rubbish at it, but you watch your daughter playing it. Like, I think it was someone at Netflix said that the social networks aren't our biggest competition. It's things like Fortnite. They're the new kind of like social spaces for younger audiences. Like they won't subscribe to Sky and like watch pay-per-view. Like they watch things on new media channels on, TikTok or on Twitter or Instagram. Like they're the new audience. That's where things are going. I think I wouldn't be too.
Well, it is interesting that Twitch is absolutely massive.
Yeah.
People watching, people playing games, and like if you would have said that however many years ago, people would have said you were crazy. But like you said, it is entertaining and it's fun.
Yeah, we can't wrap our heads around people watching people play games.
No, I prefer to play them, not watch them.
Yeah.
But we're too old now.
Yeah, but that's what my kids do. They just like get in from school and they play games and watch other people playing games.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for your question. I think there was one over here.
Hi there. Thank you very much. I enjoyed the chat. Some of the challenges that you're describing resonate, and there have been sort of, at least in the UK creative industry, present for a couple of years. I'm slightly surprised that the pandemic hasn't changed that, because lots of the companies I talk to say that there has been spike in kind of commissioning of immersive storytelling formats. It's mostly in the US, as you've said, but also here. I guess my question is, if in the skill sort of gap is a thing to kind of worry about, what would you say the role of the big platforms who are like YouTube or TikTok, who are kind of competing for the creators out there? What would be their role if they are kind of contributing positively to the development of the discipline might be? And do you think they're doing enough? I wouldn't talk about Facebook and so on, because it's slightly different storytelling, but I'm kind of interested in your view.
I think that some of the big platforms have done some things. Like, Oculus have got their creators program, and they do Oculus for Good, and various other big platforms do run initiatives. But I think they're still not to scale. They're still not addressing the kind of diversity, and it's not in the volumes needed. I think in terms of skills, in the UK, we're quite bad at making industry pay to do skills, as opposed to somewhere like Germany, where they've got like really good skills programs, especially for things like manufacturing. I think we're still too tentative, and there's still a bigger expectation on the government than potentially needs be. But I think the platforms do have a responsibility to at least educate people on their tools. So Niantic shipping out a new tool, and they're doing a big engagement program on how to use the SDK. So that whole kind of AR outside and those content experiences. I think people are doing something, but maybe not enough. I don't know. What do you think, Karl?
Yeah, I think the platforms, they're commercial entities, aren't they? They're primarily focused on their kind of their own goals rather than the wider ones. I think Jesse makes very good points. Epic Games, that they give their engine away for free. They do training for free. They pay people that are out of work, professionals, to learn their engine for free. And they launched their own marketplace store with the kind of the lowest kind of revenue share model. So.
And then Unity have got their centres of excellence as well, which they're targeting. They've got one in Senegal.
Huge community as well of Unity developers. So yeah, that's they are, I think, where it's relevant, they're doing what they can. And YouTube obviously has like the creator spaces, and so I think
seems more maybe the tools then, as opposed to the platforms, are making a bigger effort.
Yeah. Yes.
I think we're just about out of time, I'm afraid. So I'm going to hand back over to Joy. Thank you, everyone, for your questions.
A big thank you to Jessica Driscoll of Digital Catapult. I'm sorry, I may have said Capital earlier after too many time with the startups, and Karl Woolley of Framestore for a really interesting discussion, visuals, diversion, and consideration about how we go forward with this. We are going to take a short break, and we'll be back for the next session in this room on it is digitization of energy transmission, which should be very interesting. Do remember that if you want to tweet, it is #CogX 2021. See you all very shortly.